Psalm 144. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war, and my fingers for battle. He is my steadfast love and my fortress, my stronghold and my deliverer, my shield and he in whom I take refuge, who subdues peoples under me. O Lord, what is man that you regard him, or the son of man that you think of him? Man is like a breath. His days are like a passing shadow. Bow your heavens, O Lord, and come down. Touch the mountains so that they smoke. Flash forth the lightning and scatter them. Send out your arrows and rout them. Stretch out your hand from on high. Rescue me and deliver me from the many waters, from the hand of foreigners whose mouth speak lies, and whose right hand is a right hand of falsehood. I will sing a new song to you, O God. Upon a 10-stringed harp I will play to you, who gives victory to kings, who rescues David his servant from the cruel sword. Rescue me and deliver me from the hand of foreigners, whose mouths speak lies, and whose right hand is a right hand of falsehood. May our sons in their youth be like plants full grown, our daughters like corner pillars cut for the structure of a palace. May our granaries be full, providing all kinds of produce. May our sheep bring forth thousands and 10,000s in our fields. May our cattle be heavy with young, suffering no mishap or failure in bearing. May there be no cry of distress in our streets. Blessed are the people to whom such blessings fall. Blessed are the people whose God is the Lord. The psalmist here pulls together two things that we tend to separate. We either tend to say, hey, is the work that God set before me, is this my fight? Is this my battle? Or two, do I passively wait for the Lord to do things? The psalmist here prays and asks that God would strengthen his hands, that he would make him stronger in the fight that he's been called to. That he'd be ready to wage war, to go to battle with the enemies that have been set before him. And then right alongside that, not in conflict at all, is the declaration that God is his refuge, that God is his strength, that God is actually the one that goes to battle on his behalf. That there is a way to live this life that recognizes the work that we're called to, that pleads with God to strengthen us, to make our bodies and make our lives able to engage in that fight, and to anchor ourselves on the fact that it's God who fights for us. It's God who must strengthen us. It's God who is our refuge. It's God who is our shield. It's God who protects us. And the result in the psalm is this kind of humility in which the psalmist throws up his hands and says, what is man that you even think of us, that you consider us? That you would act on our behalf, that you would fight for us, that you'd defend us, that you'd come to our aid. And then in the midst of all of that, he asks God, oh God, that he would multiply the richness of his life. That his children would be strong and vigorous and that he'd have lots of them. That his cattle, that his crops would flourish. He recognizes the work, the fight that's set before him. And he anchors his soul, he anchors his life on his utter dependency on God in the midst of all of it. But we tend to pit those two things against one another. But the Bible holds them together. God calls us to work. He calls us to go to war. He calls us to fight against his enemies. He calls us to put our hands to work in the different vocations that he's called us to. And in doing so, to recognize that he's the one that defends us. He's the one that causes our crops, if you will, to be fruitful. We're parents, you're to work diligently, to love your kids, to raise them up to know and fear God, to walk in righteousness and holiness, and to recognize that we are utterly dependent on God to fight for us, to raise our kids, to strengthen them, to cause them to flourish, to cause them to be marked by holiness. It's not either or, that there is at the heart of the biblical text to everything he's called us to. Whether we're talking about friendships, or we're talking about work and vocation, we're talking about fighting enemies, or raising children, or raising crops. A call to work, a call to plead with God to strengthen our hands that we might work well. And two, to constantly recognize that God must act for us. And the result is that when God blesses the work of your hands, when he gives you kindness after kindness after kindness, when some are tempted to see in it merely the fruit of their own work, their own labor, the thing that they've earned, the people who belong to God recognize that it's in God's grace that these things have come to them. And so they lift their heads, as the psalmist said, and they sing.